Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Brad Stevens. You keep building off of those three, and you can and Marcus Smart, and I include him because he's such an important player for them. But I think this is going to be the year to not make rash judgments off of this COVID season and all the issues that impacted teams, to be careful, to not go and do dramatic overhauls of whether it's leadership or your best players off of this weird thing everybody just went through.
What do we think of that? Now the core he's talking about is about 3 to 4 people.
But it's so interesting because I go back to this last year when the season ended.
You said it.
No, it's not even. I'm not taking credit for it. I don't want to take credit for it, but it's like you can see that this was going to eventually happen to Boston because if you rewind and go back 7 years, not even 2 or 3 years, 7 years, what were they doing? They were picks and this, and we're picking the right guys, and we're doing this. But they didn't cash in. They didn't cash in. Now you fast forward to where they are today. They're in the same position they were 7 years ago. They're in the same position.
All right,
they're in the same position. And I told Jay Will and I told Big Perk when they were on, I'm like, man, that door getting ready to slam on them.
The reality is that Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Brad Stevens, and Danny Ainge, they're going to get a pass this year. I mean, you go to the Eastern Conference Finals the last 3 out of 4 years. Jason Tatum has COVID. Jaylen Brown gets injured. Marcus Smart has dealt with injuries. You get Evan Fournier. Robert Williams is out. There's a lot of missing pieces. That's not the story to me because that's just what's happening, right? The story is that this team they don't have the desire that you want them to have. They lost their last 10 out of 15 games, okay? And the problem that I have with this team down the stretch, it doesn't look like there is leadership on the floor.
Right.
It doesn't look like they want to play together and they want to actually play hard. It's a bad look for Brad Stevens. I think coaching-wise, I think he's really good. I wonder how he influences and who takes that influence from the coach and translates it to the floor from the player perspective. And I say this, if it's Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Danny Ainge, and Brad Stevens, that's your core. That's your core. Everybody else, if you're not a piece of it,
but that's a dramatic change.
That is a dramatic
change.
Yes.
Keeping those guys and you make changes outside, which they need. First of all, they have not been
they
the
have
same.
To have change.
They have not been the same defense since Al Horford left. They have not. He was a huge part of their pick.
Gordon Hayward is thriving in Charlotte.
But that's all change anyway.
Kyrie's thriving in Brooklyn.
But that's all change. Every single year, they're changing. That's what I said. If you go back 7 years ago, and I understand they've been in the Eastern Conference Final, what was it, 3 out of the 4 years?
Yep.
But that's being in the same spot because you didn't get to the ultimate goal, which is a championship. You mentioned some names. You mentioned Al Horford. That's change. Gordon Hayward, that's change.
Yeah.
Kyrie, that's change.
Well, those were
bringing in Kemba Walker, that's change.
Yeah.
Let me call this Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, because look, the Celtics are one of the flagship franchises, and when they're good, like there's a lot of interest in them. And this is a hugely disappointing year for them. Being in a play-in, that doesn't make sense for a team. Now, Ainge, you could say, has collected a lot of assets in the draft and hasn't used all of them, but he did make one amazing move, which was flipping the number 1 pick and getting Tatum out of the deal. And
don't get me started because that's Philly. I could lose my mind.
Yeah, you could argue that's one of the biggest moves that he's made.
That was Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, for Markelle Fultz,
yes,
right.
Exactly.
So you flip it, you get picks, and you get arguably the best player out of that draft.
Yeah, he's been able to do all of those sort of things, right? He was able to orchestrate the championship, big 3, all of those. So he's been able to do a lot. Injuries are a part of it, as you know, Jay.
Yep.
Injuries are a part of it. If COVID falls in line with the injury, that's part of it where we are today. But it's still no excuse for where you were at 7 years ago. You still are where you're now. I would argue that Philadelphia is ahead now where they were behind before.
That's a fair point. That's a fair
point,
and that's where I was going.
Philadelphia is ahead because 3 years ago we were like, process, here we go. But now they're ahead. They've decided Markelle Fultz out. We don't need you anymore. We're not going to deal with that. You didn't give us what we're looking for, even though we took you number 1 overall. They've decided to move on from that. Now they are one of the favorites in the East.
But Jay, don't you feel like this is where I was getting, Key? Also, you have it's I don't want to say easier, but to build your foundation of what you are, that's easier to do. To take that step now from there to championship medal, that's the harder move to make because it's such a delicate thing. If I remove this guy, how does it affect? Everybody kept blaming Kyrie for the chemistry issues. That the chemistry issues never went away. You don't have that one leader. What are you missing from this team that's keeping it from taking that next step? And can Danny Ainge get it?
I said this before. I said I understand that Kyrie says a lot of things, and people can take that and turn it into different narratives about distractions. But I said, look, it's a job also of Brad Stevens. He's brilliant at X's and O's. But the best coaches in the game of basketball in the league, you know this, and the same with the NFL, they manage personalities.
Yes.
They manage personalities. And that's always been the question I've had for Brad. But how does he manage? Because now, what's the personality of this team? Who are they? Right? Is that Kemba Walker? Is that Jason Tatum? Is that and sometimes it looks like guys check out. Like, that has to fall on the head coach. And it started a couple years ago with Kyrie.
And your star player that sets the standard.
But let me ask you this, though, Jay and Allen. Brad Stevens manages personalities.
He tries
But is it really him or is it Danny Ainge for whatever reason? Because it seems like everybody has a tiff with Danny Ainge that leaves Boston. But it's always Danny Ainge, it seems like.
I know, I hear you. But look, if you got Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker on the floor with young talent, I mean, that team needs to be way better than what they are right now. Way better than what they are right now.
Is that he did not do a good job replenishing that bench. That bench is
Agreed.
They're not a deep team, and that's cost them throughout.
That's why I tried to make the move to get Evan Fournier and
COVID.
Things
but it just seemed like Danny Ainge is always the butting the head, not Brad Stevens.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.